And it's always a pleasure every week to spend a good chunk of time with my friend Neal Coolong. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, as always. It is definitely the highlight of my Tuesday. I know that.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. Always enjoy it. The Antonio Brown thing came up this week. I'd like to retire a Steeler. And I'm sitting there going, you got to be kidding me. I got all these young players around here. I'm going to subject them to him. How do you view it?
Oh, boy. There's a lot to unpack here. I think,
yes,
though,
there is.
I think, though, in all honesty, that the surface level is the appropriate view for this. I think he was in town promoting something. I think he wanted to connect with the fans that he does have here and express some positive sentiment in a situation that, in all honesty, just knowing Antonio Brown, I really don't – I'm not convinced he feels his departure and his actions that came and went with his departure were all that big of a deal. I think he just doesn't recognize it as being a substantial problem in the eyes of a lot of fans. And I heard about it because usually what I say, and I've said this since the beginning of it, we're going to regret this. Everybody involved with this is going to regret this in some way, shape, or form, because this is the best environment for him. It's the best offense for him. He's had all of his success here. Everything that he knows as a pro football player is in Pittsburgh. And every side of this is going to lose by him leaving. And that's really what's happened. I mean, you can't say that he's had anywhere close to the success that he had in Pittsburgh, financially or in terms of his production. Right. It's not even close. The Steelers got significantly worse as an offensive team since he left. And I understand that in 2019, you got, 5.5 quarters out of Ben Roethlisberger, but right. They would have been able to make a play or two if Brown was on the field during that season.
Even Duck Hodges would have?
I think Duck Hodges,
yeah, okay.
All right, I say this loosely, he might have been able to throw a couple 5.5-yard crossing pattern
near him. Yeah, I got you.
That's the thing with Brown, and this is a conversation I got into with somebody in the media yesterday about it. There is a difference, obviously, in terms of the regulation of the game from 40, 50 years ago compared to now. Receivers are given a lot more room. They're given a lot more ability to make plays. But just because it was far harder for receivers back in the day to get open off the line should not discount the fact that after the catch is just as important as before it.
Yeah.
While today's game highlights that more,
yep.
It isn't. You can't just say, well, the defensive backs could beat him up down the field. All right, fine. It's not too hard either to scheme guys open underneath, which it's not a new concept either. They did that plenty. They could hit him up to 5 yards. If you could stop a guy at the line from catching a 3-yard pass, you are within the rules to do that. So it's not a rule change issue. The point being, Antonio Brown is, in my opinion, the best open field receiver I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
That includes Jerry Rice. Jerry Rice, yeah. Top to bottom, is better, and his longevity, it brings that out. But Brown is legitimately, in my opinion, one of the 5 best Steelers players in history. No receiver in the history of the game put together as long of a streak as Brown did. And that 6-year stretch that he had from 2013 to 18, it would have been longer, in my opinion, if he continued playing in Pittsburgh.
Right.
Things went south. It's awful in many ways. It just shouldn't have happened the way that it did. If he wants to retire a Steeler, I don't blame him for that. I mean, I think it's fairly obvious that it would be kind of a symbolic gesture. I mean, I once saw Joey Porter and Willie Parker honored at the 50-yard line of Latrobe Stadium during the Friday night game. I mean, what level of value does this really have? I don't think it's all that significant. It's not that big of a deal for him to say that. I mean, I think it's just a combination of Brown just kind of being like that. I really don't think he feels anything significant happened by it. He wanted out. That's what he wanted. He got it. He's not listening to anything else. That's probably an error on his part. But for him to make that comment, I don't think it goes any further than he has good memories of Pittsburgh. I think he's aware that his production, his success came from the Steelers. I mean, it's not all him, and it's not all Ben. It's not all anybody. It's the collaboration of all of them that led to it. But Brown had a historic run through the NFL, something that, frankly, not many Steelers players on the same level have done or have come even close to. So to me, I get where the sentiment would come from. I think he is somebody, unfortunately, that is never going to be viewed in a positive light in Pittsburgh again. But you're going to have to look long and far to match the production that man had. And I understand the anger, I understand the bitterness, but that doesn't change what he did and how skilled of a player he was.
No question he's skilled. He openly says he'd love to go to the Ravens? Why doesn't that happen? Especially with Hollywood Brown now in Arizona.
You're just lobbing me a softball.
I know I am. I know. But my idea is that I do this for a reason, right? How many home runs can you hit? That's what I do.
On this, I could go for days. One of my favorite topics is talking about how or what it is that the Ravens are scouting at the wide receiver position.
Right.
I think there are challenges that come with having Antonio Brown on your team. I think that they might not feel it as the best environment for either side for him to be in. He can certainly be productive, and even to this day, he's still the best receiver that they have, right, that they haven't signed. The fact that they wouldn't, though, is really on brand for them as far as they don't seemingly want to bring in veteran receivers who are worth more than $3 million a year. Right. And sometimes they pay more than that and get less than that. In fact, that seems to be standard operating procedure for them. We go around the league. Maybe this is a fun June conversation to have, but I'm not trying to be snarky. I legitimately feel this way. I'm not sure there are many examples in the NFL of one team so poorly evaluating one position.
Yeah,
over and over.
I
over.
agree with you on that. The Ravens, absolutely. They brilliantly look at running backs. They brilliantly look at offensive line. They brilliantly look at tight ends, and they do a lousy job at wide receiver.
They still evaluate wide receivers like it's 20 years ago.
Yes.
I don't understand. I will say all this too. Let me preface this. I'm a big Rashad Bateman fan from Minnesota. I watched him his college career. He's going to be a good player, or at least he should be.
Yeah. It
worries me that he's with Baltimore because he should be a better player. And I think it is nothing but good business for them to have traded away Marquise Brown, who I personally think is not even close to worth what he thinks he's worth. Right. I wouldn't even want the guy on my team, let alone need to pay him an elevated level. Smallest catch radius in the game. He's not even remotely tough. He doesn't make challenging plays. I wouldn't want to pay the guy a lot of money. I can find a lot of him. The Steelers repeatedly do that in second and third round. I don't know why Arizona would want to give up a one for him at all, but that's their problem. That's another issue for another day. That's kind of what I mean, though. I don't understand why the Ravens can't make hay out of pretty much any receiver that they bring in on a more prominent level, unless they are an aged veteran that they're going to feed the ball to 130 times. Eventually, Steve Smith is going to make plays. But in Baltimore, I mean, they're almost to the point of making a statue for Steve Smith because he made a Pro Bowl.
Right,
exactly. That's how receiver starved they are.
Yeah.
The fact that the Steelers signed Miles Boykin, who was a player I absolutely hated coming out of the draft. I was floored that they took him in the third round. He was a seventh-round guy. His film was bad, and frankly, literally the one catch he made last season, his third year in the NFL, probably suggests that wasn't too far off of an evaluation. I didn't talk to anybody that thought he would have been a third-round guy. Yeah. Why did the Ravens take him in the third round? I have no clue. they don't seem to have a very consistent or very detailed process on evaluating receivers. We'll see. Like I said, I really like Bateman. I think he's got a great skill set for any offense. He should be able to make plays. And one of the side benefits of getting a first-round pick for Hollywood Brown is that gives them a little bit more space to make Bateman a high target guy. And I think that's going to be their plan this year.
Yeah. Yeah, and plus they could scout the USFL and get a whole bunch of wideouts. No, I'm just kidding.
They're interchangeable. You could go from the Pittsburgh Maulers to the Baltimore Ravens.
They act. See, that's the part that gets me. I know there are a lot of wideouts. They act like it's an interchangeable part. Like, okay, all right. I don't understand. I'll say this though. I mean, Mark Andrews is the most underrated player in the NFL. I think he's absolutely phenomenal. Yep.
And he makes up for a great number of sins. But that's a bad offense with an all-pro tight end.
Yeah.
It's making plays left, right, and center all over the field. How hard is it to find one guy that could run counter to that? I mean, you really should be able to do that by now. I understand that Lamar Jackson is not the pure passer like Peyton Manning was, but he's good enough to make plays down the field if you give him a bit of help. And I don't think that they've done a very good job of doing that, to put it mildly. But their offensive line, I think, will be better if hopefully for his sake, Ronnie Stanley can stay healthy and get out there. Tyler Linderbaum is a phenomenal player, certainly for what they do.
Yeah.
If anything, Steelers fans should be really upset that they got that guy. He's perfect for them.
I mean, that was a very savvy first-round pick. There's no getting around it. The same thing in safety. Same thing with Hamilton.
In Hamilton, my favorite player in the draft, should not have been available at 14, in my opinion. But Linderbaum, more than anything, put it in this context, you essentially traded all in all useless receiver with little heart, not a whole lot of guts, and not a lot of playmaking ability. A guy that dropped more passes and caught touchdowns last year.
Totally agree with you.
For a guy that in that offense is going to be an all-pro player in 2 years.
Yep, I agree.
And you get to pay the center who's going to impact their entire line a huge amount. You get to pay him a fraction of what the Cardinals are going to pay Hollywood Brown the next 2 years.
That's right.
It's an incredible move. And then on top of that, you also got Kyle Hamilton. I think is going to be early on one of the best all-around safeties in the game.
And they know
kid's a beast.
And after having Reed all those years, they know how to use a guy like that. Look, okay, so now that the schedule release happened, and I will freely admit, I literally watched 0 minutes of it. Despite the fact that it was on 3 different channels. It's on 3 different channels. I'm sitting there like, it's on 3 channels. Now that you know the order of games, what do you think of the Steelers?
Honestly, most of my time with the schedule release comes into memorizing it. It's a lot easier to be able to recite things when you know the week, the time, everything like that. I think it's, it's kind of, it is what it is. I mean, I guess the main thing that I would look at
I love it. Whoever, you and I feel the same way. It is what it is. You and I feel the same way about it.
Opening against the Bengals kind of sucks, but playing at Cincinnati wasn't going to be fun no matter what week it was in this year. That's a tough team to beat. We saw that last year when Cincinnati won something like 798-10 or whatever it was in 2 games. Week 18, against Baltimore, that's interesting. They don't play, Baltimore in Week 18. It seems as often as they play Cleveland.
Right.
So that's interesting. Their back schedule is loaded up a little bit with their division games, which I think is that seems to happen for most teams. So I think all in all, you really kind of count the primetime games. What they have 4. I think it was 1 a month is what I figured on.
Yeah.
They tend to just crush Miami every time they play in prime time, so that's kind of nice. Colts in prime time, if you want to talk about Antonio Brown, go back and watch Antonio Brown versus Indianapolis. Anytime the sun is not high in the sky, he put up 11 for 230 and 4 every single game.
Crushed them.
Just shredded that team.
Yep.
Glory days. But, a different Colts team. I don't know how good they'll be. We'll figure that out. But, it was pretty much what I expected it to be. A bye week, 17 games. They're going to play 3 of those teams twice each, and we knew who the other ones were. I don't really think the order of it is really all that important.
Exactly.
To be honest,
Exactly.
It's not. We want to immediately jump into these factors in cosmetic nature more than anything else. Well, the weather's going to be bad when they play the Jets. That's better for them. And no, it really doesn't matter. The fields are heated. It's not nearly as cold down there as you think it is.
I'll give you a great story about that. 1981, Penn State was going to play Alabama. Bear Bryant. Okay, so it's Bear Bryant, Joe Paterno. In November of 81, they're going to play here. And I'm thinking, they're going to come up here and they're going to freeze. And the temperature was in the 50s that day.
It's perfectly fine.
Okay, perfectly fine.
Completely gone.
I mean, Bear's got a jacket on, took it off. It's going to get kind of warm. Okay, good. It's like, so you never know about that stuff.
Exactly. And to reference the Dolphins again, the monsoon that came through Pittsburgh right after they laid the turf.
Yes.
That created that 3-0 Mud Bowl game in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Which was one of the all-time highlight games in NFL history, I'm sure. But that can happen any week against any opponent anywhere.
Yes.
We have no idea.
Right.
If and when it does, I promise you, we weren't talking about the risk of adverse weather in September and October in Pittsburgh against anybody. And if and when it does happen, deal with it.
Exactly.
As Mike Tomlin would say, we do not care. It's not going to impact nearly as much as the ability of your teams. Or how about this? We can't predict a quarterback injury. Do you think you're worried about playing New England if Mac Jones isn't playing?
Right, exactly.
I'm not sure how worried about that you are anyway, but I have no clue who Mac Jones' replacement is now. So whoever that is probably not all that good in NFL standards. So you can't predict a lot of this stuff. That is to say, you can bank on playing an NFL schedule over 17 games, and there's a lot more parity in this league than we think that it is. Mm-hmm. That there is certainly in May when we think that everything is set and this team's going to go 13-4. And now we'll see where the cards fall when the season starts. But there's a lot that's going to happen between now and kickoff.
Always a pleasure, sir. You make the Tuesday better.
Definitely. Thanks for having me, guys.